I'm Rachel. Welcome back for another week of What's for Dinner. Starting off the week, I am making lasagna. In my frying pan, I have a roll of regular breakfast sausage, and I'm adding some ground beef, about 1.5 pounds. I'm going to season that up with some onion powder. As usual, this video begins on a Sunday, and there's always a lot going on Sundays around our house. And I didn't feel like chopping up any onions. I'm also going to add some garlic powder. This was the only garlic that I had. I was out of fresh, I was out of the minced, so powder it is. I'm also adding some black pepper. I like to make sure that my meat is well seasoned while I'm cooking it. I did come back with my meat chopper just to make sure that I got all of those big chunks of meat chopped up. In another bowl, I am just breaking 2 eggs, and I'm going to mix in my ricotta cheese and my Parmesan cheese. I don't always do a ricotta layer when I make lasagna, but on this day I just wanted the cheesiest lasagna. And I sent my husband to the store for the ricotta, and of course he bought the largest container that he could find. That's just how the man shops. And I definitely wasn't mad about it. In the end, you will see that this lasagna just grows and grows and grows. Like I could have fed the whole neighborhood, I think. I began to just try to mix in those eggs with that ricotta, and it was just kind of slippery and wasn't really getting very smooth. But when I added the Parmesan cheese, it was a whole lot easier to mix together. And of course, my husband bought the biggest Parmesan cheese that they had at the store too, I think. So anyway, like I said, I'm just getting that all mixed together. And just so you know, I did end up using all of the ricotta and most of that Parmesan cheese. So that is how my lasagna came to weigh about 10 pounds in the end. And so in my freezer, I have my pureed tomatoes or crushed tomatoes, have you. And so I'm just getting them into my pan that I cooked that meat up in. It was nice and hot, and I'm just working on getting it thawed out this way. I mean, why bother thawing it in the microwave and putting it in a new pan when I could just use the same one? I added a packet of spaghetti seasoning mix to that tomato puree. These tomatoes were from my garden, and I'm adding my sausage and hamburger meat back into that sauce. And this was the end product, and this was so delicious. And I'm going to add just some more garlic powder because I want to make sure that that flavor is all the way through. Some of that seasoning that I put in with the meat is going to drain off with the grease, so I want to make sure that the sauce has lots of flavor. So I added some garlic powder, and I did add some Italian seasoning as well. Once that sauce was all ready, I just put a layer in the bottom of my lasagna pan and then started nestling these oven-ready lasagna noodles right in the sauce. You want to make sure that they are completely covered and have lots of sauce to soak up. Then I started adding scoops of the ricotta and Parmesan mixture so that I could spread it out evenly into one cheesy layer. once I have the scoops of cheese in place, it makes it so much easier to spread them all around and make one layer. I then added another layer of lasagna noodles. I was nervous about how these lasagna noodles were going to turn out. I usually do the boil technique, but these turned out really good, and I will definitely use them again because they are a big time saver. I just added another layer of that meat sauce on top of those noodles so that they can get cooked up nice and soft. Next, I'm going in with another cheesy layer. I always add sliced provolone cheese to my lasagna. I just love provolone in lasagna. It gets all nice and melty and adds a really good flavor. And since I was going for cheese overload, I'm also adding some mozzarella cheese on top of the provolone. I usually do provolone as my middle layer of cheese and mozzarella as my top, but I'm just being extra. Next, I sprinkled on some pepper and some Parmesan cheese. And a little bit of Italian seasoning just to give it some color. The final step before putting this lasagna in a 375-degree oven was to spray some tin foil with some non-stick cooking spray so that the cheese does not stick. And I made sure to seal it up tight around the edges so that all of that steam is trapped inside and those noodles get cooked. I baked this lasagna according to when I wanted to have dinner on the table, so it was about an hour. I don't know if it needed a full hour, but this is what it looked like when I checked it. In my opinion, it turned out perfectly and was exactly the way I envisioned it. I love it when I conjure up a dish in my mind and it actually turns out the way that I wanted it. One of the perks to being the cook is that you get to sample little bits and pieces like this crusty piece of cheese on the edge. And here's a little peek at all of those delicious layers to this lasagna. I'm just going to lift up that top layer of cheese so you can see that layer of meat and the layer of cheese below that. Most days I'm all about keeping it easy and simple and quick, but sometimes I like to put a little more love into my dishes. Although I have to say that not having to boil the noodles really did save me some time. And I was so caught up in doing other things around the house that I didn't even make any side dishes. I just served it up with some bread and butter. Since I have to work today, I'm going to get some Salisbury steak ready and put it in the crock pot for the guys. I have 2 pounds of ground beef in here already, but I'm going to add about another pound to that because my guys like to eat. And I know that they'll each eat a couple of them and maybe go back for seconds, but otherwise we'll have leftovers. I'm just being real with you. There are no dainty eaters in this house. I'm going to put a couple of eggs in, and you can beat those beforehand or just do like I'm doing and it'll be fine. Just make sure you don't get any shells in there. Next, I'm just going to add some regular seasoned Italian breadcrumbs. Excuse me. And then next, I'm going to use the beefy onion Lipton soup and dip mix. And then I'm going to get it all stirred up. Now that I have all the ingredients mixed in, I'm going to start making my patties and getting them browned up in the skillet. And then after I get them all nice and browned up and partially cooked, I'm going to just put them in the crock pot and let them finish up for the rest of the day. And I'm just going to put my crock pot on low, or in my crock pot's case, it's going to be on warm, because it really does run that hot. And these will turn out just fine and be done when everybody gets home. And you can see how that one has like more of that onion soup mix kind of right there in it. That one's going to be a good one. Unfortunately, I didn't do a good job in getting it all mixed together, but it's still going to be fine. That's my motto, I guess. It's going to be okay. It usually is. Now, normally when I make these and I'm at home, I just brown them up in my pan and then just add all of my gravy and stuff afterwards. And then it's done. Simple, one pot, one pan meal, just the way I like it. But since I'm not going to be here, I'm not going to leave it sitting out and not cooking and that kind of thing. Alright, so I have my pan filled with hamburger steaks, and then I have this much left over, but I'm going to have to come back and add that one later because I'm out of room. While the hamburger patties are cooking up in the skillet over there, I'm going to start getting things ready in my crock pot. I am running out of time. I have to be to work at 11, and it's like 9:30 something right now, so I want to get this stuff going. And I am using a packet of the McCormick's brown gravy mix, and I'm going to just pour that right in the bottom. I added 1 envelope of water. I do this quite a bit. I don't know why, but it's just so much simpler to me to just fill up my little envelope and put my water in my dishes than to get out all these extra measuring cups and whatnot. And I'm just going to stir that around and get it all mixed up. Alright, I'm also going to be using this home style gravy, the savory beef flavor. My husband really likes this, and I think it goes well with Salisbury steak. And then I'm gonna probably add some more of the beefy onion dry soup mix. And then I'll just add those hamburger patties and then let them cook. And then when he comes home, he can whip up some of these instant mashed potatoes. These really are a staple in our house on days like today. I decided I'm just going to come in and do half of this pouch of onion soup mix so that I have some of that oniony flavor on the bottom, and I don't have to worry about trying to mix it in after I get my hamburger patties in there. I don't want them to fall apart or break into pieces. All right, I walked away from my meat for a little while and they're getting extra crispy on the bottom. So I need to start thinking about getting them transferred here soon. But I'm gonna let that one get a little more pink on that side. Yeah, the ones in the middle are looking like they're kind of well done, as to be expected, because that's how my stove works. That's all right though, they're gonna be just fine. All right, I'm gonna work on getting these into the crock pot. And it's up to you whether you want to use any of these drippings or the little bits and pieces that are in the bottom of your crock pot. I decided I did want a little bit of that. There's like no way in the world I would pour all of this in there, but we're going to put just a little bit of that flavor down in there. Now I'm just going to sprinkle on the remaining half a packet of beefy onion soup mix. Now I'm pouring in this big value size jar of savory beef gravy. I'm just going to make sure everything is good and covered. And then I just have some water in my jar to get all of the stuff that's stuck to the side of the jar cleaned off, and just to add a little more water to this and make sure that we have a nice gravy and everything is nice and covered. Now there's a good bit of brown gravy powder mix in here, as well as the onion soup mix, and I just want to make sure that there's enough water in there just to work with all of that. And I'm going to put my lid on, and like I said, I just put my crock pot on warm because it runs super high, and so like low is actually high, high is just out of this world hot, so we don't want that. And since these are already like partially cooked, we're just going to finish them off on the warm setting. And that is what's for dinner on this Tuesday. The crock pot, as always, is my best friend every single week out of the year. But we are going to showcase it now that it is October, or Crocktober as it's called in the YouTube community. And so I just wanted to share this simple, quick, and easy, delicious crock pot meal. Hey, we had Taco Wednesday this week, and you've seen me make tacos pretty much every week, but here I'm just showing you how I do my refried beans. I'm using a can of pinto beans, which I just added to a frying pan with a little bit of oil, and I just poured in my can of pintos with some of the liquid, not all of it, and then some cut up red onion, and I just added some garlic powder and some dried cilantro, and I'm cooking that until those beans really get softened and those onions kind of cook down. And because I'm just being super lazy on this day, but actually I couldn't find my masher. I do have like a potato masher. I think that I just got overzealous and donated it by mistake, and so I just made up some simple taco meat, some tomatoes that I am still getting from my garden, and they were delicious, and just added some cheese and some lettuce. And then my husband had picked up some gravy from his favorite Mexican restaurant, and so I just decided to be adventurous and try that too. It was super spicy, but it was very good. And so I just ended up rolling my flour tortillas into rolls and just added that gravy on top of those tacos, and it was just so good. I do come back in and add some cheese, some tomatoes, and some lettuce on top. I have a little scoop of those beans on the side. This was a really quick, simple, easy, and delicious Taco Wednesday. By Thursday, I'm usually pretty drained, and Bill was away doing pool league, so Dawson was at work as well, so it's just Cameron and I at home, and so I just decided to cook up some bacon and make breakfast for dinner. And we kind of did our own thing. He had eggs and bacon and some waffles. I decided I wanted a breakfast sandwich, so I'm just using some odds and ends that were in the fridge. I had some ham in there. I also had some sourdough bread that needed to be used up. It was getting a little stale, but I figured since I was going to grill it up in my pan that it was just fine. And so I'm just buttering it up like you do a grilled cheese. I have my 1 egg frying. My bread was so big I could have put 2 eggs on it, but that's okay because this sandwich is going to get out of hand. So I like my ham to be cooked up and browned. I do end up adding another piece of ham in there because, like I said, my bread is ginormous. I just put my ham on top of that egg because it started popping and making noises, and I put my cheese on top of that. Just give it all a flip and put it back on the bread while that bread is grilling up. And then that's when I realized that my bread was overlapping everything. So then I'm going to come back in and put an extra piece of cheese in there just to fill it in. We don't want any gaps or spaces. And then I'm just going to move that over so that I can fit another piece of ham in there because, like I said, no gaps, no spaces. And so I have my piece of bread buttered on one side, and because I wanted some mayo to be in the middle, I'm just putting mayo on the other side. And yeah, my fingers did get buttery, but that's okay because I have soap and water, and I just washed it off. And so after my other piece of ham is nice and warmed up, I just add that to my sandwich as well and put that second piece of buttered bread with the mayo on it, mayo side down, of course, so that it is on the inside. There is just something about the combination of mayo and egg to me that tastes so good. I love having mayo on my fried egg sandwiches. And so I'm just going to let that bread continue to cook and get all nice and toasty. And it was at that moment that I realized that I forgot to add my bacon. So I kind of disassembled my sandwich again and I added some bacon. And then we're going to get right back where we were. And I just cooked this sandwich on both sides until the bread was toasted the way I like it. I like it well done. Some would say it's burnt, but that's not what I call it. It's just good to me. Just the way I like it. And this sandwich tried to fall apart on me a couple of times, but I held it together. You know, I always go a little overboard with sandwiches when we're having sandwiches for dinner. I just had a couple of mandarin oranges on the side with my breakfast sandwich, and that was dinner. I love easy dinners like this, especially on a Thursday night when I don't feel like cooking. Next, I'm getting my crock pots out. Like I said, I use my crock pots year round, but because it is October and there's this little thing going around called Crocktober, why not? I want to join in too. So I'm going to showcase a couple of recipes that you can make in your crock pot. So I just washed and picked out all of my pinto beans that were no good. I added some diced onions and some garlic powder, some pepper, some salt, and a couple strips of bacon, and I covered my beans with some water, put the lid on, and let it go. And here's what it looked like while it was cooking. I'm from Michigan, but my grandparents and my dad are from Kentucky, and we call these soup beans. And to me, this is childhood, this is comfort food, this is family traditions, this is childhood memories, it's all the good things. I just let these cook pretty much all day. And later, when I was ready to make everything else that we were having for dinner, I just started by cutting up some onions and some potatoes. Bill was home from work by this time, and he helped me cut up some potatoes, and we started frying them up in a skillet. And then to go with it, I am just making some Jiffy Cornbread. Now, my grandma would have something to say about that, but it is what it is. I love my grandma's cornbread recipe, which is not sweet, but everyone else in the household is used to the Jiffy, so that's what we're making. And I was out of milk, so I just added some sour cream. And then we're going to add some cheddar cheese and some diced jalapenos, just for some kick. I poured that cornbread mixture into a greased 8x8 dish, and it went into the oven while we were cooking up our potatoes and onions. In the background there, I have some turnip greens in a small saucepan because I am not good like that. You know, I'm going to take a shortcut somewhere, and you know, I had to peel potatoes, so I earned canned greens. I picked up some fried chicken from Walmart because the children in the house are not going to eat the pinto beans. And when that cornbread was done, I just spread some butter on top. I was trying to make sure that it was very moist and had a lot of flavor. I wish that the texture was different. I didn't have any milk, and that was why I used the sour cream, and it was kind of dense. It had flavor that was out of this world good, but we just didn't care for the texture. I wouldn't say that this cornbread was a fail because it had flavor that was out of this world, but when I have soup beans, I want a cornbread that I can sop up the juice. I mean, you can't complain too much when you have ooey gooey cheese and jalapeno peppers like this. But next time, I'll make my grandma's cornbread. And I had my soup beans right on the plate with everything else so that all of those flavors could kind of blend in together just the way I like it. My grandma always made everything right on the stovetop. I'm pretty sure she didn't even own a crock pot. And I always thought that no way could soup beans ever turn out like hers if I cooked them in the crock pot, but it was almost like her spirit just kind of snuck in my kitchen and took over on this day. Now I'm going to show you a crock pot pumpkin dump cake, and this all took place kind of at the same time, although I'm showing you in the end. And I am just using a white cake mix because that's what I had in my baking tote. To spice up this white cake mix, I'm just adding about 1.5 tablespoons of pumpkin pie spice. I consider myself the queen of improvising. Next, I had this vanilla pudding packet, so that's going in too. Then I just mixed all of those dry ingredients up so that they were incorporated and I didn't just have a big old glob of pumpkin pie spice in one area. And then next I needed a cup of heavy cream, but I didn't have a whole cup, so I used a little half and half. And then from my freezer, I am using 2 cups of pumpkin. And I have to tell you that this pumpkin from my garden tastes so much better than the canned stuff. I am so excited to make pumpkin pie with my garden pumpkin when Thanksgiving comes. Of course, the color is different and the texture is different, but I'm sure that's why it tastes so light and fresh. It doesn't have all the additives like the stuff you get from the store. And now that I have those wet ingredients added, I decided to add some cream cheese. Now, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do this or not, and looking back, I kind of wish that I hadn't. It was okay, but it didn't really add to the dump cake, and it didn't melt the way that I wanted it to. Maybe if I had swirled it in a little better, I don't know, but it just didn't get very melty. It kind of stayed in globs like this. And some of us just kind of picked around it, and it was okay. But we're not huge fans of cream cheese anyway, so I think that if I made it again, I would just leave it out. We served up this pumpkin dump cake with some sugar-free whipped topping and drizzled it with some caramel sauce while it was still warm, and it was just absolutely delicious. And that's going to conclude this week's What's for Dinners, because we went out to eat on Saturday and I didn't take any videos. I want to thank you all for stopping by and supporting my channel. If you had fun here today, I hope you'll consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.